How important is the Book of Mormon to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? In a conference of elders in April of 1834, the prophet Joseph Smith is reported to have said, "Take away the Book of Mormon and the Revelations, and where is our religion? We have none." End of quote. He also said on another occasion that the Book of Mormon is the keystone of our religion. This History of the Saints special presentation is about the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon and Volume 5 of the Joseph Smith Papers Revelations and Translations series.
So the Joseph Smith Papers is broken up into a number of series. One of those series is the Revelations and Translation series. Joseph Smith, of course, was a mayor, he was a father, he was a friend, he was a preacher, but none of that would have mattered to the millions of members of the church unless he was also the prophet. And it's those sacred texts that he caused to be written and published that are the crown jewel of his writings. And of course, at the very top of that list is the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith himself said, was the keystone of our religion. The Book of Mormon was the first thing published before there was even a church. The Book of Mormon was so often used as a missionary tool. The Book of Mormon was seen by members of the church as not only symbolically important as evidence that God spoke to prophets today, but it was also doctrinally and theologically significant. They read the book. They preached from the book. They knew the stories of the book. So the text of the Book of Mormon was important for the early Latter-day Saints. And so the history of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon is important.
It was in 1831 that Hyrum Smith asked his brother Joseph to share the details of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. Joseph responded by saying that it was not for the world to know the particulars.
Other instances, when he talked about it, he said that he translated it through the gift and power of God. So we don't have a lot from Joseph Smith, nor do we have a diary or correspondence from Oliver Cowdery or Emma Smith or the Whitmers as they were serving as scribes. All that we did, boy, that would revolutionize our understanding of the Book of Mormon translation. Everything we know about the translation, nearly everything we know about the translation comes from later reminiscences, except for one significant text, and that is the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon. This is the closest you can get to the seer stone and the plates. This is the artifact that is produced through the dictated words of Joseph Smith. As he was translating, whatever that meant, through whatever object or means that happened, this manuscript was the product of that practice. And so I can't state how important it is. It is vitally important to understand that this manuscript is so important. If you look at other world scriptures, the Bible, Old and New Testament, other sacred writings of other religions, there's hardly any where we have the original dictated text. For some of the early epistles of Paul in the New Testament, we have 100, 200, 300 years after it was written that we have the earliest surviving copies. And those are just tiny fragments. And so the fact that we have this manuscript is not only symbolically important, spiritually important, it's remarkable. It's a remarkable piece of American religious history.
There are reminiscent accounts, or accounts that were written down later by those who observed the translation process. These accounts are very valuable.
When you have statements from Emma Smith, who acted as scribe to Joseph Smith, even if it's 40, 50 years later, it would be a very poor historian who ignored that source. Oliver Cowdery, when he talks about the these were the days never to be forgotten. That means something. You need to recognize that that's an important statement. When David Whitmer spoke often about his observation of the translation event, we need to understand that he was in that room. And as fallible as memory is, it still is important. There are things that impressed so much upon David Whitmer's mind that he said them over and over and over again. And so we need to recognize that these sources are not without their challenges, but they are important sources to consult. The irony is that we almost didn't have it. It was almost lost. So Joseph Smith finished translating in 1829, in the summer of 1829, and the work was published in March of 1830. And back then, once a work was published, you didn't often care about the textual history of that work. You had the printed item. That's all that mattered. And so we're lucky that Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith kept a hold of the two manuscripts, the original manuscript and the printer's manuscript. They used them a bit for the subsequent editions in 1837 and 1840. But then in 1841, they were there in Nauvoo on the banks of the Mississippi River, and the Lord had just commanded the saints to build a temple and to build the Nauvoo house, a place where they could welcome visitors to Nauvoo. This was a very important building, and there was a lot of fanfare at the groundbreaking of this building. There was a ceremony of the laying of the cornerstone. Deposit items into those things. It was the same thing back then. Joseph Smith placed in that cornerstone of the Nauvoo house certain coins, books that were published, the Times and Seasons, a newspaper of the day, and it was this glorious celebration. And then, just as they were about to close the cornerstone, according to several witnesses, Joseph Smith said, "Wait, I want to add one more thing." So he walked across the street into his house, and he came back with the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon. And he placed it in the cornerstone. Now, if I had a time machine, there's probably a top 5 places I would go. One of them is to that day, and to try to convince Joseph Smith that maybe it would be better not to place the manuscript in a cornerstone so close to the Mississippi River. To be fair to them, they did their best to try to seal it. So they poured molten lead over the seam of the cornerstone. So it was essentially 2 rocks that were snug together with kind of carved out in the center. And they added molten lead to try to seal it, but it didn't work. 40 years after the laying of the cornerstone, Louis Bideman, who was Emma Smith's second husband, was remodeling the Nauvoo house and opened up the cornerstone, and he saw the manuscript, and it was described as being moldy and destroyed. And so it wasn't completely destroyed, thankfully, but Louis Bideman kept a hold of that manuscript.
In the ensuing years, Louis Bideman gave portions, pieces, and fragments of the manuscript to various visitors, thus resulting in a fragmentation and a scattering of the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon.
And so what that means is that there is about 28% of the manuscript that has survived. So about 72% of it is lost or destroyed. Another way to put that, there's an estimated 600 pages of the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon that was probably produced. We have leaves or fragments of leaves of about 230. And so we have not an insignificant number of pages or fragments of pages. Because the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon was fragmented, given out piecemeal, we know of, well, I know of at least 4 individuals in the 19th century who had a fragment of the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon that we don't have today. And so it is very likely that a missionary on their way home from England in the 1880s stopped by Nauvoo, grabbed a page or two, took it home, and the family might not even know what it is that they have. There's evidence of pages being lost in subsequent years. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if there is somewhere out there a leaf of the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon, and someone doesn't even know that that's what it is. Most of First Nephi is relatively complete. You look at a page of First Nephi, the early chapters of First Nephi, and it's in good condition. And yet, the further you go, there's sometimes whole books that are missing. We don't have any of Mosiah in the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon, for instance. We do have a lot of Alma, but every single page of Alma has a corner of it missing, and so we're left with an incomplete text. We don't have any of Mormon or Moroni. We have just a few fragments from Ether, so it really is interesting to see how the manuscript was damaged in the cornerstone, where the top of the collection of leaves seems to have been preserved, but the further you go down into the book, into the manuscript, it didn't survive. I like to consider the Book of Mormon a divine text that was almost immediately altered by human intervention. When Joseph Smith dictated the text of the Book of Mormon, there are instances where Oliver Cowdery misheard what Joseph Smith said, and he wrote down what he thought Joseph Smith said rather than what Joseph Smith actually said. There are sentences that just simply don't make sense if you read the text of the original manuscript, and it's only until you say, "Oh, this is a word." He meant to say "an," A-N, not "and," A-N-D, things like that. And so we have on the original manuscript mistakes of men, which is not surprising. You read the Book of Mormon itself, and you have Nephi and Moroni and Mormon talking about, hey, don't criticize this text because of the mistakes of men. It's God's word. And the same could be said of the dissemination of the text, the transmission of the text. When the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon was completed, Joseph Smith asked Oliver Cowdery to make a second copy. Now, this obviously was before the days of Xerox machines, cameras, and so Oliver Cowdery had to hand copy the original manuscript. Now, Oliver Cowdery was a good copyist. He was careful, but he still made mistakes. For anyone who's done copying, you're going to skip words, you're going to add words, you're going to misspell words. And then the same thing happens when you print a text. The typesetter is using the printed manuscript, and he is consulting the manuscript here and then setting type letter by letter individually. So opportunity yet again for mistakes. And then every subsequent edition throughout the 19th century has that same process where there are possibilities for error. Now, when I look at the transmission of the text, I'm actually astonished at the number of mistakes. There aren't that many. They did a careful job of being faithful to the source text that they're using. But there are differences. Many of them are inconsequential, not doctrinal, but there are some that were. And so when we look to the original manuscript, that is the standard upon which we can say, well, at this point in 1829, this is what Oliver Cowdery wrote down when the words escaped Joseph Smith's lips, which is, again, remarkable. Unfortunately, the importance of the Book of Mormon manuscript, the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon, while critical, doesn't tell us everything. It doesn't tell us about the mechanics of the translation. Would that it were so easy. I wish that we understood a little bit about the mechanics of the translation. Even, back to my time machine, if I had access to a time machine, even if I could send back a camera and it would snap a picture, that would tell us so much about the process of the translation of the Book of Mormon. We don't know basics of some of these things. I mean, we clearly know some things. Oliver Cowdery, acting as scribe, did not see the plates. The plates were not on the table. Emma Smith, the plates were not on the table. Martin Harris, the plates were not on the table where they could see them. Martin Harris, Oliver Cowdery, they said that their 3-witness experience was the first time they saw the plates. Emma Smith said that the plates were on a table but wrapped in linen, and that when she was cleaning, dusting, she would have to move the plates. So the plates were present, but they weren't visible, which seems counterintuitive for any translating going on. So automatically we have the plates, proximity is important, but the plates visible for Joseph doesn't seem to be necessary for the entirety of the Book of Mormon translation. I don't know what that means. The Book of Mormon is an English text. It was dictated in English. And so at the very least, there is a little bit of Joseph Smith's culture in the Book of Mormon, in the language that he dictated that text in. Now, there are some of my colleagues who I respect quite highly who want to argue for what is sometimes called a tight translation model. In other words, Joseph Smith is reading words from a seer stone, and those words are outside of Joseph Smith's mind. He is literally a conveyor of the words, not so much the text is flowing through him with very little involvement of Joseph Smith. I don't discount that that's a possibility, but I also think that it's possible that we can allow for Joseph Smith to put his own fingerprint, so to speak, on the narrative, stories, and other words within the text of the Book of Mormon. Revelations in Translation Volume 5 is a limited volume, what we call the facsimile editions. And what that means is that we present a facsimile reproduction of the page of the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon next to a transcript of that page. And so readers have access to both the printed word, but also they can compare the manuscript itself. Now, this volume presented a significant challenge. So I talked about the fragmentary nature of the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon. I am not kidding when I say fragments. There are sometimes scraps that are about the size of a dime or a quarter that you have to place within the manuscript. Sometimes those quarter-sized fragments are the only thing surviving of that particular leaf. And there is, I kid you not, a fragment with the words, "and it came to pass" on it. So good luck in placing that fragment. But there are other fragments where the page is divided into 10, 15, 20 fragments, and it's like the holidays where you're doing a family jigsaw puzzle. You have to place all these fragments together. And we have, through the modern miracle of digital Photoshop, all this kind of stuff, we've been able to place those fragments together as they would have looked originally, and printed those as the facsimile. Now, this is tricky, and it takes a little bit of faith in our audience, because we like to present these very legible, pristine, beautiful-looking historic documents. You know, sometimes you can go into gift shops and buy old-timey manuscripts because they look neat. Well, the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon doesn't always look neat. In fact, it looks like it's had a rough journey, which it has. My co-volume editor for this volume of the Revelations in Translation is Royal Skousen. He has spent his career working on the Book of Mormon. I can't think of anyone alive today that knows more about the Book of Mormon text than Royal Skousen. He has studied both the original manuscript and the printer's manuscript. He's also studied all the editions, the published editions of the Book of Mormon, and he has done a thorough job. The amount of work that still needs to be done is vast, but without Royal's work, we would be like little children confronting the Book of Mormon. It's been a privilege and an honor to work with Royal Skousen. Royal Skousen and I are committed to present the text for scholars to use in their day-to-day work, and this volume will be an important contribution for Book of Mormon studies, and in some ways a capstone to Royal Skousen's decades-long work.
Revelations and Translations Series, Volume 5, the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon, is available now. I'm Glenn Rawson, and we'll see you next time.